Welcome back to the Rugby Rundown with my friend Jan de Koning of Rugby Unfiltered with Love Elof. Jan, we just had a bit of a chat here, and on my lunch break today, I spoke as well about this New Zealand, or the New Zealand, let's call it pundits, having to be a little bit controversial or outrageous or something. I suppose because the audience might be a little bit smaller, otherwise they get no views. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, we saw just now, I'm asking specifically because Mark Watson said the Springboks are legally correct and morally corrupt, and I talked about that on lunch break as well, my little lunch break clip there. Why are they saying these kinds of really out there things? It's just, rankles a little bit, doesn't it?
Simple explanation, small man syndrome.
Oops.
Yeah, no. Look, I mean, I know a lot of New Zealanders, and 90 to 95% of them are incredibly good people. But it's a bit like the UK media. You first got to understand the audience that they create for. And in this modern technology or modern era, if I may say, where you've got access to anything and anywhere on the web, if you want to reach a different audience and your audience is restricted to New Zealand, which hasn't got a big rugby population, people say, oh, they only got 4 million or 5 million people. The rugby population is actually smaller, probably 1 million if they're lucky. Whereas we've got a million schoolboys playing. So that will give you the context of how big our rugby audience is compared to their rugby audience. So when you work in such a small environment, you need to find a way of being relevant, and I don't mean this in a negative way towards New Zealand, but too relevant. Like we want to talk, we talk about subjects that matter, and yes, we talk about controversial stuff, but we don't need to disparage other people. We don't need to belittle other countries. Yes, we mock them now and then, and we pull the Mickey out of them, but it's good natured banter, and I'm sure their principles are the same. Unfortunately, they need to be controversial to be relevant. And that's pretty much what the UK media is, where rugby union is also a very small market in a massive, massive audience. So for context, if you go to a UK newspaper, not that anything is on or much of it's on print anymore, but if you want to get onto the front page, it's got to be a death or something like that. If you want to be on the back page, there's got to be controversy. If it's normal rugby discussions like we have, you bet it's somewhere inside the sports pages. So to be relevant or to get onto the back page, you got to find something controversial. So they will always look for a controversial angle. They will always claim that this World Rugby wants to, it's coming back again. World Rugby wants to depower the scrums. It's a thing that's been going on for 2 years and it's not happening. World Rugby has said they're not depowering the scrum. Russia said that. Everybody knows that. But they will do things like that. Say, oh, the World Rugby is going to depower the scrums because they need to get back at the box. That will get them on the back page. Whether it's factually correct or not doesn't matter. And that's exactly the same with the New Zealanders. So for these podcast hosts like ourselves, you need to find an angle that will stir a sensation and get you outside of that small market, which is New Zealand.
Well, talking about that comment now that Mark Watson made, and he said the fact that the All Blacks are now so athletically superior and designed to run other teams off their feet means that the Springboks will find nefarious ways to neutralize that. And he says it's legally correct to be able to stop and tie your shoelaces, but it's morally corrupt. So, number one, what do you think of that statement? Is there any truth to it, or is it all about what you just said, getting people to actually click on it and listen to it? Because just to call it morally corrupt is really out there, I would think. I mean, it's one statement to say, yeah, they're slowing the game down. Something to say that they're morally corrupt says it goes a bit deeper. And I think I suppose that's what rankled with me. What do you think?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, the wording is it's like the pot calling the kettle black, who started this, who were the guys who found ways of slowing down the game, playing people in mud pits so that they can't run fast, so that their forwards can be in the game or whatever. So we're entitled to do what we want to do. So if everyone wants to tie his shoelaces at a line out, go look what happens in the UFC. Look what happens in the Champions Cup. There's all sorts of teams that do that. So when they come to the Highveld, everybody does that. So are the All Blacks going to do that at Ellis Park? And believe me, they're going to struggle for breath at Ellis Park. Apart from the smog and smoke that you breathe, you can actually taste what you breathe in Johannesburg. Believe me, I lived there for long enough. You can taste what you breathe. So I'm sure they will find ways of slowing down the game. They will manage the tempo of the game. So every team tries to manage the tempo of the game. If you can't manage the tempo of the game, you need to change something, and they will find ways. They will have plans. Rassie will have plans. Rennie will have plans. It's a game of chess played on a checkers board.
On a green rugby field, yeah. Now, I just wanted to ask you, because let's go to the other side, of the legally correct side of it. There's nothing preventing a guy from sitting down and tying his shoelaces. There's also nothing preventing the referee from allowing the play to continue. We saw the referee doing that against Italy, when New Zealand played against Italy. He didn't bother with stopping the game because the guy was sitting down. He just let it continue, except when there was an injury or somebody was going to get in the way. Against Ireland, it was a slightly different story. I mean, do you think they maybe want to try and influence the ref? I want a hard ref who can see through the BS. Is that maybe what this angle is all about? The psychological mind games. Even Steve Hansen is now, having his say about the Springboks and everything else. All is this all just part of the big build up to this? Yeah, I suppose this is the biggest thing to happen in rugby since the World Cup.
Highest trees catch the most wind, and we're highest trees catch the most wind. So we're number one at the moment. So facts matter. So let's do this one. Facts matter. To our friends in New Zealand, facts matter. We are number one in the world. We are back-to-back world champions. We are back-to-back under-20 champions. We're back-to-back sevens champions, even though they say the sevens championship doesn't matter. It's the Olympics that matter. When did they win an Olympics? When did they win a Commonwealth Games? We've won the Commonwealth Games. So facts matter. The highest trees catch the most wind. Yes, it's all part of the game. Good fun and games, and let the ball. And yes, I enjoy that. I enjoy the banter. While some of the language might irk us, while some of the language might get us hot under the collar, I'm all for the banter and build up and get interest going. I mean, I know for a starters that the Ellis Park test is sold out. I think two of the tests, the Cape Town and Ellis Park tests, are both sold out. So I know that some of the provincial games are not sold out, but yeah, there's massive interest, and long may it continue.
Let's talk about those provincial games quickly. I don't want to be a guy like John Dobson, for example. Get Ntuku Matuna back last week, so you can prepare. I've got a proper Springbok prop that's really, put up his hand this year. And this Monday he's back in the Springbok side. So now you have to go back to square one and find someone else to replace him. What's the thinking behind it? I mean, I understand why they would bring him back, but why would have sent him back in the first place? What's happened? Did something happen in the Springbok camp? We know there's a virtual press conferences often. Yeah. Suppose we'll find out then, but that's not fair towards the franchises, is it?
I don't think this series is ever going to be fair towards the franchises. Some franchises have fewer players, like the Lions. They don't have a lot of players in that, so they can prepare undeterred. The Currie Cup team is playing and preparing on their own. The URC team is preparing for the All Blacks. The Stormers have been doing the same thing. I mean, we can see how the Currie Cup team is struggling. I mean, taking 40 points against Boland. Those kids are learning some hard lessons that under 23 children. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. But no, the system or the tour is not fair towards the franchises. But still, and now I'm going to use a typical coach cliche. It affords opportunity to some younger guys to play against the All Blacks who would not give his left leg. I was always going to say something else. Who would not give his left leg or give an arm and a leg just to be able to face the haka or front up to the All Blacks in a proper match. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, obviously I'll be attending the two Cape Town games, and I'm so looking forward to it because it's such an exciting series for me. And being and I don't want to say I'm an All Black fan, but I'm an admirer of All Blacks rugby.
Yeah, no, sure. That's why it's a big thing.
Because I'm pretty much to beat them, like a true South African. I want to play the All Blacks so we can beat them. We can say we're still number one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Bulls just sent out an article this morning about how excited the Bulls are and everything else. And the Bulls got a new strength and conditioning coach, Rupert Oberholzer, also somebody comes with a bit of history with Johan. That's an interesting one. But we'll talk about the Currie Cup just now. You talked about the under-23 children. I spoke to Pee Wee and Omlomo yesterday just to, so what on earth is going on there? We'll talk about it just now. But let's just get back to the Springboks quickly, and the All Blacks. Ardie Savea staying behind in New Zealand for a little bit. And a lot of banter going on about that as well. I mean, I understand the fact that the guy's played so much rugby, he needs a bit of a break. What does it say that your captain doesn't come with you on the tour initially? There's lots of saying that he's actually the guy running the All Blacks, not Dave Rennie. What do you think of that?
That's an interesting. Maybe we should push that one and get them order out up that like Victor Matfield and Fourie de Pre was coaching the Springboks under Peter de Villiers. Maybe Ardie Savea is coaching the All Blacks and he's decided to do a bit of admin back home. We've got the same situation with Peter Steff. I know I did an article that said Peter Steff will start against Argentina, but in reality, Peter Steff will most likely also stay behind. So he won't travel with the team next week to Argentina. Players like that, really valuable players, sometimes tend, I don't want to use the word overplayed, but they get stretched a bit, and then you get to a stage where there's a big series coming up like it is, and you need to find a way to break him. So he's staying behind, R&R, freshen up. The best word I use, and it's a good word, is to freshen up, sometimes he will do his running, he will do his training, or whatever he needs to do back home. But mentally, he can freshen up. He doesn't have to be in that environment. He doesn't have to be on a plane. He can travel in his own way. So, I mean, they're sending, for starters, the All Blacks are flying out, the first batch of All Blacks. They're flying in 3 different trips. Just so, I mean, that I had the All Black press. I've got the entire press at my disposal. So, Rennie made it clear they're flying out in 3 trips. The first batch that fly out Thursday, and that's the team that's going to play the Stormers. So that team will be here by Saturday, Sunday, and they've got a full week of preparation to face the Stormers next Friday. That's the opening match of the tour. And then the other guys fly via various destinations because of the trouble that's in the Middle East. So they can't go via Dubai anymore. So they've got to find different routes to fly. So they come in 3 batches, and Ardie will only arrive the week before the first test. So he's getting a couple of extra weeks of refreshing. And I think we're doing the same. I'm not sure if Peter Steff is with the team or whether he's on the farm in the Boland, So
Swartland.
There's nothing for me. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a great idea that they refresh the players and you can have your best players in the test.
Yeah, that's true. Did you say who's going to be the captain in those first games?
Cody is going to be the captain. Cody is a tour captain in any event. Ardie will be the match captain. He says the tour captain has a lot of admin to do, a lot of public appearances, media and stuff that he needs to do. So Cody will do, because he's a seasoned guy and he's done it a lot and he's comfortable with it. So Cody will be the tour captain and Ardie will be the test captain.
Now, we were speculating yesterday about who's going to play in these franchise games, and you said now that the team against the Stormers are going to come over early. Did he mention any names there that we can look forward to? Do we know who's going to come play in those games?
Beauden Barrett will play against the Stormers. That's a fact. That's a one name, because he was asked specifically about Beauden, who didn't appear. If memory serves me correct, he didn't feature against Ireland, so Beauden is back. And he will make his comeback, for lack of a better word, against the Stormers next Friday.
Anyone else that we know that we can expect?
Not that I can recall off the top of my head. I'll probably sit through the press conference again today and get some ideas. But off the top of my head, that's the only big name. There was a lot of talk about Ardie and why not, and then some of the debutants. A lot of the discussion was around how the news was given to the players, because there were 10 players that was recalled. There was a squad of 34 and they recalled another 10 players, including the 4 debutants. And they split up the phone calls. I think they split it between 2 of them, so each had 5 phone calls to make. And Dave said one of the youngsters was so excited that he struggled. He was shivering, he said, with excitement, and you can imagine, suddenly he was about to get on a plane to go to Dunedin, and then a bus to Invercargill, where he's going to be with the Southland team. And suddenly he gets a phone call and say, "Listen, don't get on that airplane. There's another plane waiting for you going to South Africa." So you can imagine any young player suddenly gets that call for New Zealand or for South Africa, they'll be extremely excited. So yeah.
Goosebumps, man. Do you think they're going to mix and match those franchise teams, or are we going to see because I'm a little worried it's for them. It's Stormers, Sharks, and Bulls all in a matter of a week. Are they going to interchange those players? I mean, you said the Stormers guys are coming a bit earlier, but the Sharks are basically 4 days later. That's a tough ask. How are they going to approach that?
So in that same press conference, the one thing that he did say is they started with the first test team. They knew and know who they want to play in the first test. Barring any injuries, their first test team has been selected. It's a bit like Rassie. Everybody knows Rassie before the Nations Championship started in July. He had selected a team for every match, and every player knew which match he was going to play in. All Blacks are the same. They've sat down. They've got a team for the first test, and then they work back from that. So obviously, the guys who's not going to play in the first test is going to play that midweek game before the first test. Then the Saturday game. So the test team will most likely play a Saturday, and the Stormers. So all that stuff. I think the Stormers a Friday game, then a midweek game.
The Bulls on Saturday. Bulls on Saturday.
Bulls on the Saturday. Yeah. So the Bulls are probably going to face the test team because they're going to play the next Saturday.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So that's the long and short of it. That's how they but they started with the first test team and then worked their way back to arrive at the Stormers game. So the Stormers are also likely to face something close to the first test team.
Yeah,
because those guys will then there will be a midweek team, and then the Bulls team will be the test team, and then the guys will play against the Springboks in the first test.
So that means that test team is going to be playing 5 tests in a row, basically, because that Bulls game is going to be a tough one. 5 weekends in a row. Let's rather just call it that. It's not going to be that easy. And most Stormers, everyone's also going to be tough. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying that Bulls game is right before the test. So that means 5 tests. The last one is going to be in the USA. I mean, that's a tough ask, don't you think?
Yeah. Their travel schedule, they will be fatigued by the fourth test. There will be some serious traveling. So remember, they also still travel up and down. So because the Springboks will stay whatever they will start off in Joburg, and they're already there. The guys are already preparing there, and the guys who are not going to Argentina will stay there to prepare and train and prepare for the All Blacks. So there's no travel for them. Whereas for the All Blacks, they travel to South Africa and then they travel up and down. They start off in Cape Town, then they fly up Durban, then up to Pretoria, and then they prepare for the test. So there's a bit of flying, and then they fly back to Cape Town for the second test. First play the Lions, then fly back. So I presume they will also do a bit of a split thing, so that the guys who play the Lions will stay in Joburg, and the guys who prepare for the second test will fly down to Cape Town, so they get extra time in Cape Town. So yeah, there'll be a lot of those things going on. Preparation and planning that's already in place for the tour.
Yeah, I saw them saying that they're chartered flights. That's interesting. Dedicated chartered flights. That's clearly money is not a problem for the All Blacks, contrary to rumors. But anyway, let's do.
The charter, the charter flights is a sponsored thing. So the announcement was made yesterday. The 2 flights. So the one plane will be painted green, and the other plane will be painted black, and they'll be flying the players around. There is, if you look on social media, I think it's Saru's or the Springboks social channels, you'll see a picture of the 2 different planes.
Okay, cool. Well, like I said, greatest rivalry in more ways than one. All right, just something else we were speculating about yesterday. Players and teams are not used to these long tours anymore. I mean, this is now 6 weeks away from home, flying from New Zealand, like you said, which is on the other side of the world, to South Africa, up and down, whether it's in a chartered plane or a black painted plane or whatever, it doesn't matter, it's still. And then going to the USA afterwards and, staying in hotels and being away from your family. Young players have basically, they've hopped across the ocean to go play in Australia. That's how far they went. Suddenly they have to be in South Africa for a long time. How much of a mental challenge do you think that's going to be?
Yeah, from my days of touring with the Springboks, it's about 2/3 through the tour, especially if the results don't go your way. Things tend to emotionally get a bit to you, your children might be sick at home, and and all you have is a phone call, and the wife is nagging in your ear. I have to always deal with this, and they have the right to be upset a bit, but it does become emotionally, mentally, it does become a challenge. But they will have ways of dealing with it, and they will have ways of team bonding and team building and getting the guys mentally up. I mean, they've got such large backroom staffs at the moment. I mean, they bring a psychologist or a cop doctor, as we say in Afrikaans, a mental guru that helps the guys to refocus. So, no, those challenges are real. I mean, I'm sure just like when the Springboks go on year-end tour, or, practically they're away from home for 6 months. Yes, they get short breaks in between. A lot of the guys had last week off, and the build-up started again this week. So a lot of guys went home last week. Now they're back in it. After July, had a break, week-long break, back in training. Some of the guys are flying off to Argentina, and I'm sure that by the weekend, some of the guys will be allowed to fly home again, or those are the up country or in Durban. And it's a quick plane up 2 hours later, and you're with your family for the weekend. Sunday night, you fly back in. So, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the other angle of it, the buffet angle. Remember, Jake White famously said the buffet got hold of Kane and Moody. Do you remember those days? And,
Yes.
living in hotels, living out of a suitcase, not just mentally challenging, it's going to be some other challenges as well. I mean, keeping the guys fit, keeping them motivated, like you just said. I mean, this tour is more taxing on so many more levels than we actually realize, don't you think?
Yeah, living in on a tour. I remember, if I now go back to the mid-90s, 93, 94, when we toured Australia and New Zealand. And so 94, we went to New Zealand in June. We're back 7 June, July, August, somewhere in August. So we came back. We were in the country for 6 weeks, and we headed off to the UK for the year-end tour. I remember that from June to December, I was in the country for all but 6 weeks. I was out of the country for all but 6 weeks. Believe me, towards the mid to end of that year-end tour, things start getting to you. So, yeah, living out of a suitcase, going from hotel to hotel, from hotel to training ground to airport. You got to find a way to freshen yourself up as well. So if you got something that's interesting, and every person is different. Some guys like coffee shops, some guys like museums, some guys. So my interest was old castles. So everywhere I went, so Edinburgh, Cardiff, all those things, I used to make sure that lunchtime on a Friday, all my work is done. So Friday afternoons were my off time. I had all my stories, everything was done. And then that Friday afternoon is when I freshened up. I went and visited castles, and that evening I had a few drinks, and maybe a late night or two. But I made sure that I take time away. I get out of my hotel room, because I saw some guys that sat in hotel rooms, and they started getting very, very depressed if you just live in a hotel room. So you got to, and every player will have his different way. And I'm sure the teams will also find ways of making sure the players don't just sit in their hotel rooms. They'll go play golf. That's the popular thing with the Springboks or the rugby players, is that they go play golf. Some guys will do other stuff, do shopping for the family and stuff like that. But they find ways of making sure that you don't get cabin fever.
Okay, enough about the All Blacks. Let's talk about Ellis Park again. You wrote an article, interestingly enough, to the next Currie Cup game for the Lions are not going to be at Ellis Park, and we've been advocating for this for a while. And I don't want to be a doom prophet, the prophet of doom for Ellis Park. I mean, it is a bit of a challenge, but it's a challenge everywhere. But you wrote an article. Why are those next two Currie Cup games not going to be played at Ellis Park?
So I'm just going to give context. So when I watched the Lions game this weekend, I didn't watch the full game. I got it was such terrible. I mean, pretty much just weren't in. Poor Jimmy Stonehouse had about 10 heart attacks by halftime. But it was horror upon horror, shocking to see no spectators. I mean, I asked the Lions for an exact attendance figure. They still haven't given it to me. It's their prerogative if they don't want to divulge that. but I've heard that there were less than 1,000 people in that stadium. It's a 62,000 seater stadium. You put 1,000 people in that stadium, you see small pockets of 2 people here, 5 people there, small groups. It was so and then I checked the fixtures and I saw that the next 2 games are away. So I said to them, and I reached out to Rudolf, to Altman, and to Pietie Burger, the stadium manager. And Rudolf eventually answered me, and I said to them, if the next 2 weeks, because they're playing this week, they play the Bulls at RAU Stadium, or UJ Stadium, apologies. UJ Stadium is the old RAU Stadium in West Dean. It's an athletic stadium, which they use for the Varsity Cup. It's got all the facilities, so they can comfortably do television broadcasts and stuff like that. And then the following 2 weeks later, they will play Boland at Wits Stadium before they go back to Ellis Park for the Stormers game. But the Bulls and the Boland game are at UJ and Wits. So I thought, okay, if this is a success, because I know there's students that enjoy that, there will be, they'll have 5,000 people. So UJ has got seating for about 7,000 people in their stand, plus banks for the around the athletic track. So you can seat 10,000. Their capacity is roughly 10,000. Wits Stadium got a bigger embankment higher up, and the residences are close. So I know they got a 5,000. The stand is 5,000 seats, so that'll probably be filled. And then you can add another 10,000, depending how deep you pack them, or whether they put out picnic baskets and stuff. It's a Friday night game, so I presume it will be a few less. But yeah, you can also get 10,000, 15,000 people in there. So if this is a success, if they get, let's say, 5,000 for each game, that's 5 times more than what they get at Ellis Park. So my question was, if this is a success, will you consider moving more games away to smaller stadiums? It was an emphatic no. Ellis Park stays our home. Now that to me is madness, because I understand the URC and the Champions Cup and the European competitions require certain standards, international standard stadiums. That is understandable. That's acceptable. If those stadiums can't be upgraded, I would consider upgrading them. I mean, we see in Europe stadiums of 10,000 all the time. So why not consider upgrading RAU Stadium's facilities to a higher level rather than have an empty Ellis Park? They don't want to budge, and I call them stubborn because that is stubborn. When they play the Stormers in round 7 or thereabouts, round 7 they'll play the Stormers. That's the final round before the playoffs. So when they play the Stormers, by the time they play the Stormers, they will again have no people in the stadium after perhaps 2 weeks of really great success. Rudolph's argument is that they will find ways of marketing the game Ellis Park to those students. Those students are not. It's 40 rand. If you can't afford, it's 40 rand for a ticket at Ellis Park. If you can't lure people with such low prices, how are you going to get a student to drive all the way to Ellis Park, risk their life? And I don't think they probably understand and they know that, but they think they're just too stubborn to publicly acknowledge the fact that that area is now so bad that people are not willing to risk their lives anymore. And it's a fact. I mean, whether Rudolph and them, they can argue all they like till the cows come home. The fact is that area is derelict and downright disgraceful, the amount of crime in that area. So yeah, that was the story, and that's what I know that Rudolph is not going to like what I wrote, and he's not going to like what I say now, but they're just too stubborn to acknowledge that they've got a problem. And we know that Altman's got shares in the company, that the holding company or the owning company that owns the Ellis Park precinct. So this involves more than just the rugby stadium. It's an athletic stadium next door, which they use as their training ground. It's a tennis stadium down the road. It's a swimming pool down the road. So that entire precinct, the partners include the people that own Pirates Soccer Club. Altman has got shares. I remember I did a story about the shares a while ago. I'll just have to go research it. But so he's got shares in that. But you're not going to get your money back. You're not going to make money. I think it really is time for the Lions to start considering moving to another venue, because Joburg is not interested in solving the crime. So the crime is rampant in that part of the world. Nobody dares going into Joburg Central And this is the inner city. It's on it's a suburb of the inner city, Doornfontein, and there used to be media houses in that area. All the media houses, even Media 24 and Persco, well, Persco no longer exists, but Media 24 and those guys, they all moved out of that Doornfontein area because of the dereliction and the what happened to the environment, you know, or the area. So yeah, I mean, if Rudolph and them wants to stubbornly stay there, and Altman and them, they can be upset with me as much as they like. That's my view, and I think they're just being stubborn.
Let's just talk about the performance of the franchise, the URC franchise in the Currie Cup. I mean, the Bulls haven't won a single game. Badly beaten by the Griquas after a good start. The Stormers got a hiding in Boland. My friend Ari said, you know, after the church service, the beer tent opened. It was a good Sunday. It was a lot of fun, but 3 points for the Stormers. I mean, really, what's happening? And the Lions playing well with a very young team. That has to be said. And then, of course, the Sharks, you know, beating the Pumas, losing against the Free State. What's the structural problem with the Currie Cup with these franchises specifically? Because I spoke to Pee-wee, and I'll talk to you about that just now. But what's your opinion? What's causing these bigger teams to struggle in the Currie Cup?
Because they're playing with such young players. So remember, the Currie Cup's been relegated to a development tournament. Now, that's not the franchise's fault. That's the SARU structure. But the challenge is that the URC. So basically, let's take the Stormers for argument's sake. John Dobson is busy preparing for next Friday. He will have 30 players because you get 23 players in his match day squad. There's URC, and then there's a couple of you usually have about 30 players in a squad just in case of injuries. So those guys are not involved in the Currie Cup. So you're now playing with your third and fourth teams, and effectively the under 23 teams with a few old hands thrown in. You know, so. Like the Stormers, they've got Skara still on the bench. Now, Skara is a wonderful person, and he was a good player. But some players, like Willie Leroux, is perhaps not up there anymore. You know, doesn't make him a bad person, doesn't make him a bad player. He's just not up to that standard. So you've got those kind of players that's supposedly the experience. And while it might work in the dressing room and on the training field, on the field, it's not giving the desired. So that's one. The same applies to the Bulls, and I'm sure you will reveal or divulge some of what Pee-wee said, but they will have a similar scenario. They're preparing, Johannes preparing for the All Blacks. So he's got a whole bunch of players, 20, 25, 30 players that are preparing for the All Blacks. And Pee-wee is sitting with the leftovers. And I don't mean that disparagingly, but he's literally sitting with the leftovers. So again, you're talking about your third and fourth teams. The Lions has got less people in the Springbok team, so they've got but they're also preparing for the URC for the All Blacks. So they're also playing a young team. But I think their structures have always been in the Currie Cup. They've always led towards. That's why they struggle in the European competitions, because their teams are so inexperienced. But in the Currie Cup, at the level of the Currie Cup, they will do well because young players, youthful exuberance will get you through some tough times. So yeah, I mean, a 2-point loss to the Cheetahs and a win against the Pumas, a very bad Pumas team, I must say. Poor Jimmy Stonehouse. You know, if he had any hair left, he would have pulled that out as well.
He's got some left.
Yeah, that's a long and short of it. I mean, it's just these franchises are preparing for playing the All Blacks. So 2 teams are missing from their front line.
Well, what Pee-wee said, basically what you just confirmed, is the fact that you have to play with old, very young players. They played the under 23 Cup, and the Bulls won that. So, but I think the big problem is that the Cheetahs and the Pumas, to a degree, and the Griquas and the Boland, players have played together in the SA Cup. They've played together. They've got more cohesion. You've got these young players, very inexperienced, third or fourth best in the union, maybe even less. And then they've got to, come up against these more experienced, more cohesive teams. People said to me, they're struggling with the set pieces, which is something that you have to just practice. And people saying, but they clearly said they haven't been practicing enough. I tell you right now, people, I've seen them practice together for a long time. It didn't just start practicing yesterday. People saying that the Bulls, for example, looked unfit. Not even remotely true. It's simply a matter of these players are being young, they're being inexperienced, being thrown into a tournament. It's not their choice or it's the union's choice. It's just the way it works out. And that's just what it's going to be. We have to just accept it. So Sounds to me, from what I can gather, that next year there will be no more SA Cup but the Currie Cup involving all of the teams. Do you hear anything about that?
Yeah, that's been on the cards for a while. And yeah, I'm sure SA Rugby will get flack for that. But I mean, poor Border. Imagine Border playing a really strong Bulls team or really strong Stormers team in the Currie Cup. They're going to get slaughtered. I mean, they're getting slaughtered in the first division already. They got slaughtered in the SA Cup when you were playing almost like for like. So if they can't cope at that level, how are they going to step up a level? So while the idea is good, I think I would, there's some teams just don't belong there. I mean, SVD has done really well to win the first division, and Heineken May and them almost qualified for the Currie Cup. So in some places you can. So SVD, Heineken is, or SVD last year finished second last in the first division. So they were basically where Border is now in EP. And Heineken went in and is busy establishing systems, which at that level is easy to implement, and it's working for them. They got close in the SA Cup to qualify for the Currie Cup. They won the first division, so you can see the systems are beginning to work. They will survive in the Currie Cup, but Border and those guys will not survive in the Currie Cup.
Well, like you just said, SWD, all they needed was a good coach, some better players, and some money behind them. And look where they've come. They've come from second last to winning the first division. They almost qualified for the Premier Division as well. Maybe just that's what needed. But that's what's needed. Maybe all the good players don't have to be concentrated in one union. They can be spread across all these smaller unions. Maybe with a bit of help from Saru and the likes, lift everybody up. Rising tide lifts all boats. Maybe that's not such a bad idea. I like it.
Yeah. Who knows? If I mean, the Issa Promise team has got Alistair Coetzee there and Matt Proudfoot. So they've got good coaches there. I just don't think they've got the infrastructure. So it's one thing you can take Rassie Erasmus and Dave Reddy and tell them to go coach the Border. They're not going to win any games because they have to work with inferior structures. First of all, you have to put, and that's what Heineken did. He put structures in place. He built it up, So is that there's not just the coach, and Heineken is a very good coach, but he's also a person that knows how to put structures in place. And that's what is needed for those smaller units. So the Falcons are doing very well because they've been implementing and putting structures in place. The teams that are struggling is the Leopards. Eastern Province are a little bit better this year, but still very, and Border, So I would say 10 teams are Currie Cup level and can win some games. The others are going to struggle to win any games, except, the Leopards might beat Border, or Border might beat the Leopards, and Eastern Province might beat both those teams. And then, but then when you play the Pumas, you play Griquas, who's been together for a while, Cheetahs, who's been together for a while. So suddenly it's a very different kettle of fish to play these teams. And that's what I'm saying, maybe 10 teams, but yeah, who knows? Let's see what happens next year if it does come to fruition. If it does realize that they make it a 14-team Currie Cup, we'll see.
It comes back to that question of, shouldn't there be a drafting system like there is in NFL, for example? So players get allocated to the team that ended last gets its first choice of the best player this year. New players coming onto the market, kind of a thing, so that you force players to go play there maybe for a bit. Maybe just needs a bit of a rethink. Maybe the union shouldn't take all the contracting and the likes. Anyway, Jan, we've been going at it for a while now, so I think we should cut it here. Thank you so much for making time for me. Appreciate it. It was fun as always, man.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, as I say, I enjoy chatting rugby, and sometimes we have some fun with other countries. And to our friends in New Zealand, please don't take it personal, but I still think you're suffering from small man syndrome.
You said it. All right, Jan. Thanks, man. Talk to you next week. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers. Till next week.